It is the final word story time. Story time 198. Adam Collins back with you for the first time in a little while. Jeff Lemon with me. Actually, no, we would have already put out the weekly show by the time this goes to air. We're recording these out of order. This is one of those times when we are mixing with the space-time continuum. You might be able to hear in the background, although we'll see how good our editing is, that Jeff is currently in an airport. I'm currently sat in my office in London. Hello to you.
Well, yeah, hello to you. You'll definitely be able to see it if you, for instance, are looking at the video, because there's quite palpably an airport behind me. That doesn't necessarily come through in audio, but it will come through in audio that there'll be announcements, there'll be people chatting, there'll be French and Spanish and English going on, because we're all in the glorious melting pot that is the JFK, John F. Kennedy Airport. What says respect after getting shot in the head like getting an airport named after you? People's favourite places. Everyone in America gets a highway or an airport. The two things that make people the happiest, waiting around on one or the other. That's what you want to be associated with for the rest of eternity.
It's like that. Well, I mean, it's the most cliched, thing to note in the world in the situation being two lads from Melbourne, but the Harold Holt swimming pool. There in Malvern. It's Malvern, isn't it? Which has and that was named after him.
It's Fitzroy, isn't it? Is it the Fitzroy?
No, the Harold Holt's the one in the inner east. I can't remember which one the Fitzroy one is, but nonetheless, having a pool named after him. It's possible that was named after him when he was alive and it wasn't a posthumous thing, but still,
maybe.
It does rather stand out given that's the way he sadly died all those years ago.
Or not. Had he been in the pool, he would have had a better time. Probably he would have had a better chance. Hard to get a Chinese sub into the swimming pool.
Yes, quite right. Anyway, I saw the spot where he went missing at Chevron Beach a number of years ago. I was on the ferry with Rach going from Queenscliff to wherever it is that you go to, or the other way. I can't remember. Sorrento to Queenscliff. That's it. And you can. I was kind of Google Mapsing. Oh, it's there. That's where it was. The beach that you're not meant to go from. By the way, two things. It's our show Storytime 198, brought to you by Westfield London, Westfield Stratford City. 198. Two things for you, Jeff. It was the cap number of Les Flavel, the favourite of Ian Chappell. We are duty bound to say the favourite of Ian Chappell when talking about Les Flavel, who played 19 Test matches between 1954 and 1961. Speaking of JFK, the year he became president. And 198, the King of Geelong, Billy Brownless, 198 games for your Geelong Cats when he was pensioned off just before joining the 200 club. There you go.
Yep. I mean, maybe it needed to happen. You can only sit on Ashley McIntosh's head once in your life, and that moment had passed.
I did watch, I got up at like 4:30 in the morning to watch the Hawthorn-Carlton game on Sunday. I'm not sure if you've caught up with this, but we fucking spifflicated them, and in the process went above them on the live ladder. It was all very fun. There's the Hawks radio thing that SEN's doing now, which I've never wanted to call football, Jeff. I think you and I have done it once when we were pissed at the pub, calling a game off the telly from like the late 90s or something like that when we were, I can't remember the context. And, we have the skills to do this, for we are sports broadcasters. It isn't that hard to describe what's happening in front of you if you have the rhythm.
As long as you know who everyone is, that's the thing. So it's when it's a team of that era where you've got every player without even having to think about it. That's the difficulty, and that's where the real skill of it comes, that you've got 800 odd players on footy lists and you've got to be able to do them all.
Well, that's it. And like the fact that I've had this renewed love affair with the Hawthorn team this year, not because they're doing well, but I guess it's just this place in my life where I'm able to enjoy it more than I have in recent years and watch a lot of it. I do know the Hawthorn players, and I can describe who they are and what they do in ways that I probably wouldn't have been able to have done in the last few years. And they've had this parochial commentary. Stephen Quartermain was calling. Dipper, final word guest and friend of the show, Robert Di Domenico, was the special comments guy with Limo at the back, and it was all very cool. Just on Hawthorn, actually, before jumping off, my holiday in Menorca, first time we recorded since I got back from that. I know I did the Jimmy Anderson ep from over there, but the first time I've actually been on with you. That was made exponentially better by finding a final word listener, or rather he found me in the breakfast queue on our second morning there. So Ed, who is another Londoner, who was there with his young family, come up and goes, just identified that he was a listener to the podcast and a fellow Hawthorn fan. He's got a young family. I've got a young family. His wife's lovely. My wife's lovely. Their kids are great. We spent like 5 days just hanging out with their family, all because he's a final word, guys. That ended up, and it was made that much better in the absence of a kids club. There was no kids club at the Malka. We needed to kind of, divide and conquer a little bit with Rachel and me, and we had moral support via Ed, who is someone I'm sure we'll see again, and it's all thanks to the final word. This is the community we have, Jeff.
You got to make your own. You make your own kids, and then you make your own kids club. That's the way that it works, as I understand it. Being something that is far from my ken.
All right, Jeff, one more thing to get into before we start, or two more things, sorry, a little bit of admin here. One is that live shows, get into it. We haven't talked about it on the podcast yet. We will have by now on the weekly show, which we're recording tomorrow. Bear with me on that. But live shows in Perth, Melbourne, Adelaide, Brisbane and Sydney. Most of them are aligned with the Border Gavaskar Trophy. It's our first ever national tour. Links in the show notes. There's a 10% discount, I think we're calling it, something like that for patrons. So it's not too late to access that. So if you join us on Patreon, you get the ad-free feed, you join Discord, you join that community I was referring to before, you support the show, you make things like Storytime happen, and your rep with Daniel, 197, was an absolute belter and explains why this is an important thing for us to keep doing.
Yeah. That was so much fun. I've just got to say, we had, like it always happens, we had no intention of going on for that long. We did the classic, like we could be in and out in 50 minutes here, and it ended up being about an hour 50 on the recording, and came back to about an hour 35 after we'd done the edits and the wine breaks and all the other things that you have to have when recording with Mr. Norcross. But just leaning into it and having a great time. We sort of disconnected that call, thinking it really is fun. Like what we get to do is an extremely enjoyable thing.
And it couldn't happen without our patrons. So the fact that we've got it's not a life-changing amount of money, the discount on the live show tickets. It's what we've been able to negotiate with the tour operator, but still it's a token of our appreciation. Perth night before the test match, then Melbourne between the Perth and Adelaide test matches. Adelaide 2 nights before the test, Brisbane the night before the test, and Sydney, which is night 5 of the test. First time we've done a national tour. Bring your friends. We're going to do a group discount thing. If you've got 8 people in the group, let us know. We'll do it in bulk. We'll get you some kind of discount for that as well. So Christmas parties, cricket team dues, that kind of thing. This is the time to get on board. We're giving ourselves a really long run up. Normally we organise these with 2 weeks to spare. We're not doing that this time. The guests will be announced in the fullness of time. That is the live shows for the summer of 24-25. Anything to add on live shows, Jeff?
No, just that we had a tremendous time last summer, and hopefully we will again.
Last bit of Carew, and I don't know whether you've had a chance to read this in the show notes, Jeff, but I'm going to give you a flavour for it. Remember when we interviewed Lawrence this year, or I think I did it solo, but you would have listened to it back, that I said to him at the end when we were doing the errata section that I pledged that we would find one for 1925 for the 2025 edition of the book. And I said that without really having any plan as to how I would follow it up. I might have said something on the pod like, our listeners will take care of it from here. Well, what do you know? Neil Taylor, a legendary effort. He's taken up the challenge and he has found an error in the match report of the England-South Africa test match that was played in 1924. I've gone back and checked the show notes, the scorecards rather. The long and the short of this is that the second day, the 18th of August, 1924, so 60 years before my birth, which puts it all into context, given I'm having a birthday this week, there was a reference to 6 Englishmen losing their wickets and 232 runs being scored on that day. Well, it's 332 runs. They're out by an even 100. That's enough. I've spoken to the editor of the Wisden Cricketers Almanac, Lawrence Booth. The wheels are in motion. We are going to have a correction made to Wisden 100 years later. He's also gone back, Neil, I hasten to add, and checked every other edition of Wisden to make sure that nobody's done this before. First. No one spotted it first. So
that's the thing. You can anyone can find a mistake, but it's probably been corrected in the 100 years since. So
that's it.
That's the key.
That is the key. So I've looked at Cricinfo scorecard as well and seen the end of play analysis where on day 1, it was an end of innings South Africa all out 342. Day 2 was a rest day, which meant day 2 became the Monday. And England were 332 for 6 overnight with Patsy Hedra 92 and Arthur Gilligan 4 not out, 2 names that have been raised many
The
times on
Fash.
story time across the journey, indeed. So yeah, that's an
He's
absolute
the
belter.
one I couldn't think of the other week when I was trying to remember who went to that school that I've now
Dulwich
forgotten the
College.
name of as well. Dulwich College, yeah. When I was groping around for the memory of Dulwich alumni, it was, of course, the Fash man himself.
So thanks to Neil Taylor. He's going to be at our Final Word game as well, so I look forward to buying him a beer and thanking him from that. He's offered to score. He scores for Will Day's team, and Will's part of our Final Word 11 that'll be taking the field on the 20th of September at Dulwich Cricket Club, around the corner from Dulwich College against ODB. And our Final Word Tour of Scotland is next week. Can't stop, won't stop. We're playing on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday up in Scotland. Then I'm playing for MCC on Thursday on the way home. We're all guns are firing, all systems are going at full pace right now for the Final Word. Jeff, that is everything from me. All that's left to do is say that we have some numbers to get through and a game that's called
Nerd Pledge. It's called Nerd Pledge. I'm just going to say that because I don't want to be arrested in an airport, particularly in the United States of America. One of the probably low on the list of countries where you'd want to be raising attention at the airport. I'm just going to put it that way.
Indeed.
Nerd Pledge is a game that we play with the aforementioned people who are part of the online community who send us in a number. They send in an amount of currency. That number relates to cricket. We have to figure out what it means. Tom Carew Hunt has dug deep into the pockets. He's a new pledger, and he's pulled out 58 quid and 67 pence. That is a generous pledge. Thank you, Tom. 58.67. And so there was no clue with it, but the fact that he'd gone to the trouble of doing 58.67 rather than, say, 586 or something which could generally be turned into the same sort of number, it makes you think the second decimal is important, and it does bring to mind, for me at least, a certain format of number that we see quite often.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's going to be a batting average, right? 58.67. It's got to be.
Yeah.
Must be. And the fact
or a really shit bowling average.
Or indeed a really shit bowling average. But the fact that it lines up with a very famous batting average and one that's bang on inside the top 8 ever in Test cricket, well, it was top 7 until Harry Brook made 100 a couple of weeks ago, makes me believe if I was Quantum Leap and I was Al and I had Ziggy in front of me, I would say I've got a 94% chance, this is going to be correct, that it's Ken Barrington's batting average. Now, this is relevant because didn't you and Daniel went on a Ken Barrington tangent on Storytime 197? Am I right in remembering?
You might call it a spree. We went on a long, because it was all about the Tom Vivers Test match when he had to bowl 95 overs, and Barrington was the central cause of that. He's the prick who batted for about 11 hours and just refused to do anything in the Test match, while Ted Dexter was going along pretty slowly as well. So, yes, we had a fair bit of Barrington chat. And Barrington's come up a bunch of times in story time, sort of in passing, making a score here or a score there. Yeah. But I don't remember us actually telling his story. So if that's what you're going to do, then it might be time.
I'm so glad it's worked out this way for a number of reasons. I feel like Barrington's been kind of in my crosshairs for a while as well. We did that, the book club a couple of months ago in relation to 1961. He's part of that, he's there. And because that book deals with the Manchester Test match, but the whole series and the whole context of the summer. And that's the start of, I guess, part 2 of Barrington's career, or in the middle of that stage anyway. But I thought what would be useful in answering this, Jeff, is to provide a bit of context around the batting average. Because, you see an average like that, reminder of that number, 58.67. It's a massive number in Test cricket. It's a huge number. Like, it's nearly 60, and 60 is the number that only a handful of people have surpassed, and then there's the enormous gap to 99.94. And the sample size is massive. He played 82 Test matches, 6,800 runs, 20 centuries, another marker of greatness, right? 55 scores above 50 in Test cricket in a career that spanned 1955 to 1968. So I think that he gets judged on the curve of the era. If I say to you 1955 to 1968, you, like me, would probably say that includes some of the boring, there's some interesting series within it, but taken as a whole, it's not a riveting time in Test cricket history for lots of reasons, and they've been talked about on this pod before. But even when you go through the 7 above him, it's a pretty quirky old list. So you've got Bradman, of course, forever the outlier. Adam Voges in number 2, which in his own way is quirky on the basis that, as we know, Voges played 20 test matches and batted 31 times for Australia. But it's a weird thing that he ended up with the second highest average. It's just one of those things. We celebrate Adam Voges for what he achieved, the great story, the banging the door down to get in the test side at 35, the bulk runs, the remarkable way he batted against the West Indies and New Zealand. But yeah, ultimately, Voges at 2 does stand out as being not a great of the game necessarily. Graham Pollock probably would have been a great of the game, but only played 23 test matches because of apartheid and South Africa being excluded, and he was excluded with that just when he was really getting going. Then there's Headley, and Headley's average should be higher, right? I had a look at this. I crunched the numbers on it. He ends up with 68.83, 60.83, which is a huge number. But it's those 3 fucking test matches that he plays after the war. 2 in 1948
when he's past
and one way past it, and one in 1954. He comes back for a single test 6 years after that when he's an old man. And those 3 post-war test matches take his average down from 66.71. So really it should be Bradman, Headley, Field. But nevertheless, he ends up in that pack after Adam Voges and after Graham Pollock. Then you've got Sutcliffe, proper pedigree from the interwar golden era, 54 test matches, no dramas with that whatsoever. Harry Brook, 59.91, but that's a little bit rubbery, right? Like Brook right now.
It'll come down probably.
It'll come down in exactly the same way that Smith and Labuschagne have had averages that have been above anyone other than Bradman, but they, at some stage or another, always end up in the 50s. And you would anticipate that Brook's amazing start to his career, at some stage there will be some reversion to the mean or something like that. Then Eddie Painter, and what I find interesting about Eddie Painter, and we know some of the parts of the story, Bodyline and so on, and Brisbane and whatnot, he's got the same analysis as Voges, 20 test matches, 31 innings, and they are only 55 runs apart. So again, it's a quirky one, right? No one thinks of Eddie Painter as one of the all-time greats of Test cricket, but he appears on this list currently at number 7 because of what happened with Brook the other week. And then at number 8, here's Ken Barrington. But where he slots in, and again, I think this kind of feeds the idea of it being weird, he slots in front of a whole slew of all-time greats. Weeks, Hammond, Sobers, Sangakkara, Smith, Hobbs. They're the group of cricketers that come directly after Barrington. But no one talks about Barrington in that crew of 6, despite the fact that his numbers do stack up with pretty much all of them, depending on which numbers you choose to use, the ones I rattled off before, for example.
Yeah, it's a curious one. Like when you think about, or when I think about the England Test cricketers who've averaged over 50, which traditionally has been 8 players. Sometimes it's gone up to 9 when Joe Root's gone up, and then recently when Brooks gone up. But 3 of those 8 of those historical 8 are Tildesley, Painter, and Barrington. None of whom are thought of or spoken of generally in the same sort of way as the Sutcliffe, Hobbs, Hutton, Hammond sort of types who are revered. And then you've got these 3 what seem to be more sort of workmanlike players, or whatever the reason is that they're not regarded with the same. Maybe it's like you say, because there were so many draws, like Daniel was saying last week. The 50s was the slowest scoring decade, and the 60s had the most draws. So Barrington's efforts didn't result in a lot of wins, and that might be part of it, that you're not seeing innings that contribute to winning test matches. Yeah,
and that'll be borne out in the career that I'll tell you about now, and I'll try and do this all in about 10 minutes, which won't feel right, but I'll give it my best shot. So he's born in November 1930. His dad's name is Percy. His mum's name's Winifred, actually, which was quite nice. We saw Winfred Yarvi win the steeplechase last week, and Winnie was so excited by this. The fact that Winnie had won a gold medal, you can imagine she was cock-a-hoop. She kept trying to say, but is she Australian? Is she an Australian gold medal? I went, she's from Bahrain, but we can still celebrate it. Anyway, so Barrington's dad spent 28 years in the army. He was a World War I veteran, but he never got higher than the rank of private. So, he basically, Ken, he grew up in the barracks with his dad, who was there until 1947 after the war. Percy played cricket for his regiment, so cricket was part of his life. But Ken was very practical. Left school at 14, became a mechanic. They were living in Reading, joined Reading Cricket Club, played pub cricket on a Sunday, played midweek comps on a Wednesday, played for Reading on a Saturday, and that was kind of it until he was talent ID'd, air quotes, to the extent to which you can be, back in the late 40s by Andy Sandham, another final word favourite, another Surrey great and all the rest of it. So Andy Sandham saw him play and got him picked up for the Surrey Colts, which were a team that played around that time when Barrington was 16 years old. But as much as anything, it was about his leg spin. And he took an early fifer for the Surrey Colts, and that's what kind of got him going, more as a spinner who batted down the list.
Really? Started out as a leg spinner. He started out as a leg spinner. That's remarkable.
Yeah, I didn't quite twig on this before, but he batted number 8 in his first game for the Surrey Colts, like Smith did for Australia, and bowled his leg spin. Anyway, in 1947, he gets a job working on the ground staff at the Oval because he's got this skill, having been a mechanic, and they pick him up to work at the ground. And Andy Sandham's part of that recruitment ploy, and he's kind of an early version of a coach. He wasn't formally the Surrey coach, but he performed the role, probably more like what Alex Stewart does there now as the director of cricket. But he's seen as the man who starts to oversee the Surrey team around that time. Ken had never seen a county game rather, until he'd worked at the Oval. So just kind of reinforcing that, there's cricket in the family, but this is a guy who is not of privilege. He's not playing for some extravagant school. He's just a guy who has grown up in the barracks, and he's playing some cricket, and he's got himself a trade, and he's got himself a job that happens to be at the county ground. And Surrey have no interest in someone like him bowling spin because they've got these two blokes, Locke and Laker, who are pretty good at cricket. That actually informs why he starts batting more, because he wants to try and find a way to play for the team that's playing at the ground that he's working at. So it's quite nice how he has that as an objective. In 1949, he does play at the Oval a little bit for the Surrey staff team. He plays, I don't know who's in the staff team. Is it people working in the kitchen and working behind the scenes? But he does take the field at the Oval that year playing for the staff, and that's the year he's called up to national service, and he goes to Germany. So he's in Germany for 12 months, becomes a Lance Corporal, grows quite a bit, grows to 5'9", never a tall man, but grew 5 inches in the year that he was away in his late teens. And I suppose that's the ideal height for a batter, about 5'9" or something like that. In 1951, though, back to the staff team, back to the on the tools, and that's all he's really doing. And, he's 21 by now. Most guys have had a chance to have a bit of a career by this point. Not Ken.
He's outside the pathways. In modern parlance, there's a bit of there's the Nathan Lyon ground staff thing. There's the he's the Mark Blitzarves of Surrey, if you will. Identified eventually later, mature age recruit from outside the pathways.
It's a great comparison to Lyon because it's exactly that, right? He's taken the job at the Oval to do a job, not to be a pro in the same way that when Nathan moved over from Canberra, it was for that reason. Anyway, by 1952, they give him a game for the Twos. And the Surrey Twos at that point play in the Minor Counties Championship. Fuck, I don't know how they pulled this off, but they let the Surrey Twos play minor counties. And, he went okay. He went sufficiently well enough that that's kind of where this Surrey career proper begins. And, again, I kind of supply you with all this background just to kind of give you a sense of who this guy is. He's not Peter May. He's about as far away from Peter May as you can get, despite being contemporaries. And it is a great time to be hanging around at Surrey as well, by the way. 1952 is when the Surridge team wins the first of their 7 county championships on the trot. And 1953 is when he gets his first little look in, right? He plays the Champions game against the MCC at Lords to debut at the start of 53. Then the next day, Surrey are playing the touring Australians in that 1953 Ashes trip. So he plays back-to-back first-class games to start his career, which is weird in its own right. Benno remembers a young Barrington as being someone that looked quite capable. Benno, of course, on his first Ashes tour in 1953 as well. It took until 54 when he gets a breakout back against the World Century against Gloucestershire when Surrey are in a bit of trouble before he gets recognised as someone who should really be permanently in the first team. But then he goes on a roll. He's well set, has a great 1954, I think it is. He's written up as the best young player in England since Compton. He's 24 by now. It keeps kicking on in 1955, and he's called up for England, where Peter May's now captaining. So Peter May's the captain at Surrey. He brings Barrington into the team. They're playing South Africa in 1955. Sadly for Barrington, he makes a duck on debut and he's dropped pretty much straight away. He said that he didn't feel like he fitted in. And again, I feel like there's a bit of this with him. Like there's this idea that he's a little bit of an outsider. At this early stage, he becomes a real insider down the track as he grows into his life. But in these formative years, he's really on the outside pushing in, trying to find a way to become a cricketer. Always battling, I guess is my point. Then there is the fuck up of his career. In 1955-56, I think it's one of these stories that we don't probably we probably haven't reflected on story time. I've certainly read about it in Peter Oborn's book Wounded Tiger. They go on a
Yep.
goodwill tour of Pakistan in 55, 56, not a test tour, but like a I guess a mending bridges tour after partition or something like that. The MCC this is, and Barrington's on it. And this is where he and 5 other teammates kidnap the Pakistani umpire Idris Beg, who they've been complaining about his decisions. And then they kidnapped him and poured a bucket of water over him and humiliated him. And Peter Oborn in his book, I remember, went through it, and there's no objective suggestion that this umpire was anything other than straighty 180. These England guys were just sooking it up, right? And this got really dangerous. They nearly got sent home. It became a situation where it was on the ground pretty fast and loose with the crowd screaming for the MCC to be sent home. And that probably, putting the dots together here, contributes to Barrington being in the wilderness till 1959.
Interesting.
He doesn't really play, and he doesn't do well. I reckon it probably had an effect on him. Having to work so hard to get there, then getting roped into this fucking stupid thing with a few of his teammates. And then I reckon psychologically, if you look at it does taper off for a few seasons until 1959. And then he gets his real break. India are there. He's recalled to the test team, and he goes on a super consistent run, which probably helps with that really high average. 56, 80, 80, 87, 46 in 5 consecutive innings. So he has that reputation of being quite a dependable cricketer. They go to the Windies in 1960, and he makes tons in consecutive test matches. So his first 200s of his test career, 126 at Barbados, then 121 at Port of Spain. The first of 8 times in his career, 8 times, where he made centuries in back-to-back test matches. So when this guy got in form, he was fucking hard to get out of form. He did have slumps, but when you got him good, when you got him at the right time as a player, he was an incredibly difficult person to dismiss and to even knock out. At one point, Wes Hall hits him in the head and he doesn't leave the park, and he bats on, and he's a gutsy guy, and he gives nothing away. So, and that 1960 series is the first time they beat the Windies outright in the Caribbean. So it's significant. He's a huge part of it, and so it goes. Because he started the next season.
They've only done it twice, haven't they? Two or three, is it?
Yeah, 2 or 3. It's not many at all.
I think it's two in the 60s and the one in 04, whenever it is. 04. That's it.
Yeah, with Harmison and Butcher and all the rest of it. Weirdly, he actually gets dropped at the start of 1960, despite his heroics in the Caribbean. He started the season slowly, but he's brought back for the second test match, and he's very consistent at home without any tons. And so it goes in 1961 as well. So he's making his presence felt without being a match winner. But again, it's away from home in Asia where he becomes his ton machine. That winter tour that follows, he makes 139 in Lahore, 151 not out and 52 not out at Mumbai, 172 at Kanpur, 113 not out at Delhi. Huge. Back-to-back hundreds in 4 test matches. They go to Australia in 1962-63. Back-to-back again, 132 not out at Adelaide, 101 in Sydney, 126 in Auckland on the way home from the Ashes trip. Then 1964, Jeff, the innings that I'm sure you and Daniel referred to last week, the epic, the 256 that is usually used to whack him, right? The Old Trafford innings that took 683 minutes. But how's this for a different type of spin to it? If Bob Simpson's batted for a comparable amount of time for 311, and you can bat the way that Barrington can bat, why would you give Australia any chance of winning the test match? You know what I'm trying to say? Like, if you've got Ken Barrington in that situation, I actually have a bit more respect for it now, thinking it through. He was the guy who could do that thing.
There's no way they can win it. So at that point, they're 1-0 down in the series. They've got 1 to play at the Oval, so they can level it, but there's no way they're going to be able to win a test match.
That's right.
Conceding 600 in the first inning. So there isn't really much else to do. It just would have been so fucking dull.
Oh, yeah, it's clearly the worst test match to look at on paper you can almost imagine. But, yeah, I've reevaluated my view on that, looking at the card and looking at the series and thinking it through a bit more deeply, that he was totally entitled to, as you say, almost play for next week and get the draw, and so they did. Back-to-back tons again in 64-65 at Durban and Johannesburg, one of them unbeaten. And again in 1965, this is interesting, 137 at Birmingham against New Zealand, and they drop him. Doug Insole, who's the chairman of selectors at the time, who we've spoken about in the context of the Oliveira scandal, sacks him for the good of the game because he batted so slowly when making 137 at Birmingham. So we talk about players being unlucky. They dropped him for batting too slowly. Then they bring him back for the third test of the series at Leeds in 65, which, of course, Jeff, is the Edrich 310. And he made a century in twice the pace that he had at Birmingham, got 163 as a real up yours to the selectors, and then he's back in business. But, fascinating that they would drop him on the basis of perception. I think this reinforces that the game did have a problem with its image through this time. And imagine now dropping a player after making a century because it didn't look good, right? Like there is
so much of it was just down to gate receipts. So like that's where their income came from, people paying to come in. And if it was drab cricket, it got written up in the newspapers as being boring. People didn't want to come down and watch. And there was a real preoccupation at times. It was like the overrate thing. There were urges to do something about it, which sporadically flared up, and occasionally something would be done like this or like the boycott one or whatever it might be.
And the career continues as it might. It has back-to-back tons another time in 65, 66. Adelaide, a ground where he made 12 scores above 50 in a row, Jeff, across multiple tours. 102 at Adelaide, 115 at Melbourne, then 148 at Lords against Pakistan, then 109 not out in the next test at Trent Bridge. And again in 1967, where he makes 142 at the Oval against Pakistan, then 143 at Port of Spain that winter, where it all began against the West Indies. But they were two consecutive test matches for England. And then sadly, it all ends in 1968 quite abruptly. So 75 at Lords, which I won't say that. I was going to talk about a future guest on the show, but I'll leave that to speak for itself. 49 and 46 not out at Leeds, only the Oval to come. England needed to win because we're going into that final test of the Oval Test match. They didn't want to risk his slow scoring, so they dropped him again. Despite having a pretty good 1968 Ashes, they dropped him because they're like, we need to win at the Oval. And look, they got it right, didn't they? They won with 5 minutes to spare, the famous mopping up effort. What Underwood did at the end, who knows? I mean, it's hard to categorically say that not playing Barrington won them the test match, but I guess their concern about time did play out with the way that test had that big delay in it and all the rest of it. So no South Africa tour in 1968 due to the aforementioned De Oliveira trip. And this is where it all ends for him. Interestingly, he goes to Israel on a private tour playing for the Bournemouth Cricket Club, where my mum and family are from, down in Bournemouth. They arrived just after the 6-day war, and they play this tour in Israel, right? And then he's made the first president of the Israeli Cricket Supporters Association in 1967-68 winter. But the reason he was able to do it and why it all made sense for him is he was en route to Australia again, the place he loved batting so much, to take his part in the International Double Wicket World Championship, batting with Colin Milburn, who, of course, had this reputation as being this hard-hitting, and we've told the Milburn story many times, and he was part of that 1968 win, took one of the catches off Underwood on the final day around the corner at leg slip. But, yeah, Colin Milburn was partnered up with Barrington, and they did play in this double wicket tournament, and very sadly, at the Junction Oval, Ken Barrington collapsed in the shower. It was a heart attack. He was only 38 at the time. He didn't die, but it was a close-run thing. It was attributed to his lifestyle, not so much drinking, but he really did struggle with the stress of Test cricket. And he smoked a lot, and I guess it was a different era with the type of food and all the rest of it. And instead of running the gauntlet and playing county cricket, he was told to stop playing Test cricket, but he decided to stop altogether. So that's the end of his Test and first-class career. Nobody with more runs in Test cricket with a higher average, apart from Bradman. And you look at the sequence in his average. He averaged 39 in county cricket, 46 in first-class cricket, 58.67, our number here in Test cricket, and 63.96 against Australia. So it kind of sums him up. He gets better, or he plays better, or he's numerically better, the harder or the higher the bar or the harder the circumstance should be on paper. Less than a third of his hundreds were in England, so he did it better away from home. Not many people can say that. I know Graham thought when he passed away last week, there was that reference made to him as well. They only lost one Test match when he made a century, and they won 8, but that, of course, means there were 11 draws, which backs in your point before, that a lot of the time he was making hundreds where they were saving matches, but still only losing one of the 20 where he made centuries. It's like that Mark Waugh thing, right? When Mark Waugh made 100, invariably Australia won the Test match. A similar thing with Barrington in reference to not losing. He did stay involved. He did do some South Africa touring, but not rebel tours, a bit more like the tours we referred to with it was International Cavaliers and the ones that Beto went on and that kind of thing. These weren't the rebel tours. These were a little bit different and before the Glen Eagles agreement, presumably, where they banned teams outright from going to South Africa in the 80s and all the rest of it. Becomes a selector for England between 1975 and 1981. But also that was in the era when they didn't have a coach. So he just kind of became the tour manager as well. So he's the guy that takes England to the centenary test in 1977, which would have been so cool to have been a part of, and on multiple trips to Asia in that time where he liked batting. So they made him the tour manager for the MCC when England would go away in the winter. They didn't tell him about World Series cricket. All the team knew in 77. No one told Barrington because they knew that he'd probably blow it up. He was a bit of a traditionalist on that front. But he also was forward-looking. In 1977, he did get boycott back after 3 years, but he goes, I want that Botham guy in the team. So that that selection of Botham really young is down to Barrington wanting him because he said that he was the next Keith Miller. And look, Botham was indeed the next Keith Miller. That stress I talked about before, which was the catalyst for his first heart attack, I suppose there could be no more stress for a tour manager than what happened in the Caribbean in early 1981. The Jackman affair, I mentioned the Glen Eagles agreement before, but where England were wanting to play Jackman and they picked him and they couldn't. They had to skip the country and it was chaos and they go to Barbados and the long and the short of it is that when they finally played that test match in Barbados, Barrington's on the balcony watching the players dismissed as they come in and out through the day. Robin Jackman actually bowls well on that debut, but I digress. It's all the circumstances around that test match. And that night he had a fatal heart attack in his hotel room on the 14th of March, 1981. So he died at the same city or in the same country where he made his first test ton all those years before. He passed away at the age of 50. He was dead before he even got to the hospital. So a huge legacy as a batter, as a grafter, as a guy that really got stuck in. At the Oval now, there's the Ken Barrington Centre, Jeff, which you've been to many times, where we had the press conferences in the indoor school downstairs. He was also a huge Lord's Taverner, which we like to always mention as our one of our primary partners here on the show, and did a lot for that charity along the way. Had a big hand in developing England teams through the 70s and the early 80s before his demise. And someone I'm really glad we've been able to tell the story of in some depth. Ken Barrington. For Tom, Carew Hunt, thank you so much for joining with that generous pledge at 58.67.
KB, another one for the KB list. And extraordinary the way that things ended up there. I didn't realise that Barbados is where he'd left the party. But it's one of those stories that is low-key enough that you don't necessarily hear about it, maybe because the player was more low-key than some of the others. It's interesting who gets the spotlight and who doesn't, not on the basis of what they've achieved, but how it's perceived, I suppose. We are due for a break. We'll have one, and then we'll be back.
All right, it's Storytime 198. It's brought to you by Westfield London and Westfield Stratford City. Jeff, the school holidays are in full swing, and there's no better place to take the kids and check another day off the calendar as you count down them going back to school. If you've been listening to our show through the summer, you know all about exploring the worlds of your kids' favourite TV shows at Sabibi's Rainbow Adventure at Westfield London. That's the one out at Shepherd's Bush. But Little B's Soft Play, which I usually am not a huge fan of the soft play centres, but I suspect with Peggy I'm going to be going to a lot of them, for she is a brawler. Little B's Soft Play is now open at Westfield London as well. Kids under 6 can safely play and climb through this vibrant world of wonder and adventure. There's a line here about the Oval Dream Bees, ODBs, which I read out on the Jimmy app without reading it properly. I'll leave that be this time. Also, lots of great offers and events for kids and families across the 400 retailers, 400 shops. It's beautiful there, Jeff. We've been there, we've eaten there, we've shopped there, Westfield London. So come down there. What a great place to take the kids during the dog days of summer, which I suppose we're in now. The month of August is when people clear out. It's a bit less vibrant than July or June when there's sporting events going on and whatnot. A bit more chilled out with the kids on holidays. Why not go to Westfield London, Westfield Stratford City, where it's more extra and less ordinary?
Is soft play just like squishy stuff? Like you can just handball your baby in there and they'll knock around and be fine?
You know, like it wasn't as big a deal when we were kids. I don't think. I think it's quite a big deal in Australia now as well. You kind of climb up soft blocks and like end up like in a fucking Tarzan rope or something, and then you go down a slide into a bunch of balls, and you know they're they're
Yeah.
they're, they're, they're quite they're quite they're fine. I go on them with Winnie, and
Like,
Winnie doesn't fancy it, but as I say, I'm pretty sure this is going to be right up Pecky's
okay.
alley. Bless her.
Yeah, like the old foam blocks at the gym. You could do practice your
Yes,
backflips and whatnot.
exactly.
All right, very good. I have got a pledge from Dave Brown. It is $20.12. It's in Australian currency. We pursued Dave for some information. Dave, is there anything about this you want to tell us? He did not reply. So I've run out of patience.
He's a regular correspondent, or he has been
He
over
is a
the years.
regular
Dave Brown
correspondent, but he
must be on
hasn't.
holiday.
He's missed an email or something because I've given him a few weeks leeway. Hasn't come back to me, so I'm just going with it. I'm saying, Dave, statute of limitations. I'm calling it. I've decided what your number is, and in the same way as it was for Ken Barrington, when I see 4 digits 20.12, I thought, well, first thing I'll see is it somebody's test bowling average, and indeed. It is. And maybe this is the kind of thing Dave would want because this is obscure. This is firmly dusty old bastard territory. If we talk about the career of Henry Promnitz, who played for South Africa in the 1920s. Most of the sources I have say that he is Henry Lewis or Louis, I don't know, Ernest Promnitz. But Cricket Archive, which we use for some of the more obscure stuff, has him listed as Louis first, Louis Henry Ernest Promnitz. So I don't know who to trust. I usually am prepared to go with Cricket Archive. It's a German name by heritage, Promnitz. He's born in the Cape Province of South Africa in 1904. He dies in the Cape Province of South Africa 81 years later and seemed to like being there, given the impression of the life that he has. He, at the age of 20, starts playing first-class cricket for Border. And Border are pretty shit as far as the sort of Curry Cup teams go. Like in fact, most of them are pretty shit, let's be honest. The South African first-class teams, Griqualand West, never win anything. Border, never win anything. Some of the others go through long patches of being absolute dog shit as well. So he's playing for the team that's not very good. He's a young fella. There's a picture of him bowling, which I don't know if I can figure out how to send it to you, but maybe I haven't been organised enough to do that. He's weirdly reminiscent of Brett Lee. Like he's a bit more lean, but his face looks like Brett Lee's face. He's got that sort of nose and the swept back ears and the kind of widow's peak hair with the. If you
I'm looking
Google
at
him,
I've got a photo of him on Google Images now, which is just as
the photo with the bowling action.
Yeah.
He's like he's like an underfed Brett Lee, but he didn't bowl quick. He bowled spin, and he bowled both kinds. He swung it both ways. So he bowls off breaks, he bowls leg breaks, he gets the ball to do all sorts, and he's like those kind of spinners. Often people struggle; they can't really pick him early on. So he, for that reason, I guess, arrives on the scene with a bang. His second match, first-class match against Eastern Province, he takes 6 for 55 in the first innings, 5 for 46 in the second innings, and he's away. Even though his team is shit, he plays 4 seasons with Border and does well enough in not many games. They're only playing 3, 4, 5, 6 matches a season, and he's taking 20-plus wickets in those few matches. He gets called up after 4 years with Border to play for South Africa. He has one drawback, which is that he's a dreadful fielder. He's a bad enough fielder that even though there's not much biographical information available about him, that gets mentioned all the time, that his fielding sucks. So, that must feel great for him that people kept bringing that up. But he gets into the team. He's a number 11 as well. He's not the worst first-class batting average of 11. That's not terrible. He did make 1 half-century in his career. So he's not the worst, but he's down the bottom of the test batting lineup. And his first test foray is Joburg. It's Christmas Eve, 1927. And what does that mean? It's Wally Hammond's debut. Just after Wally had the cock put back on. The graft worked. It reattached, and he was able to get back to playing cricket. So there's a lot of familiar final word names in this game. Ewart Astle, who Daniel and I spoke about last week, who was England cap 226. He's in this team. Geoffrey Legg, who you've spoken about before. George Geary, the bowler. Herb Sutcliffe is there, opening with Percy Holmes rather than Jack Hobbs on this tour. Ernest Tildesley's there. South Africa have Buster Newton, the guy with no knees and one eye. They've got Dennis Morkel, who I didn't know too much about, but ended up reading about. Fabulous player. I'd love someone to cue me up for a Dennis Morkel story, or indeed an original JP Duminy story. I have mentioned original JP before, Jacobus Petrus Duminy. He also has a fascinating life, which I'd like to talk about at some point. Hint, hint, people listening. And Nummy Dean, one of the great names for a skipper, is captaining this side. Anyway, South Africa all out 196. They're in some trouble. Promnitz is the last out. He's made 4. England are beating up on them. So the South Africans, okay, they've got Percy Holmes out for a duck, but then Sutcliffe and Tildesley put on 230 for the next wicket. They both get hundreds. And then Tildesley gets out. Hammond comes in. He's surging off on his way to 50, batting with Sutcliffe. They're 2 down for 252. And then Promnitz, Henry/Louis, comes in and gets it clicking. It starts to work. He gets Sutcliffe out caught for 102. And immediately he gets Bob Wyatt, who's a good player, LBW for a duck. Then Greville Stevens, who's at 6, who's a highly rated amateur bat. He's caught for a duck. Buster Newton comes in and gets Jeffrey Legg caught and bowled for naught. So 3 ducks in a row. And then Henry Promnitz gets a couple more. He gets Ewart Astle and the captain, Ronnie Staniforth, both caught behind in single figures. So Hammond hits one up in the air. Promnitz takes the catch even though he can't field. Hammond's the last one out. And they've gone from 230 for 1 to 313 all out. So he's done this job. He's taken 5 on debut and he's done something. He's reined them back in. South Africa still can't bat, so they get overwhelmed second time around. Wally Hammond takes 5 for on debut, which is a story we have talked about, although not through the South African lens, and there's a small chase for England to win it. But still, he's, the achievement of 5, taking 5 for on debut, we talk about hundreds on debut all the time, but probably don't accord the same amount of respect to 5 for on debut, especially in your first innings. Gets picked in the second test. He goes back home to Cape Town. Titch Freeman plays this test, which is always nice to see his name on the scorecard. And they're right in it, South Africa. They rout England for 133. Then they make 250. Terrific position. But England go big in the third innings, make a bit over 400. Couple of 80s, couple of 90s, no hundreds. And then a similar sort of thing happens where England are way, way, way ahead. And then Promnitz, who's the 5th bowler used, suddenly has an influence. He gets Hammond out and then Tildesley out in quick succession. And from a point of being 278 for 2, they lose 8 for 150. And he's able to pull them back again. It's just the head start they got was too much. So they're able to set 312. South Africa make a fist of chasing it. They get 224. But it's 3 for 56 for Promnitz. So he's got 5 for in his first innings. He's got this 3 for. He's got some very high quality players out. He's gone at 1.8 runs and over. He's got 8 wickets at 20.12, which is our number. And then that's how it stays. He gets dropped for a fast bowler for the third test. Never plays for South Africa again. Carries on in the Currie Cup. Goes and plays for Griqualand West because he likes teams that suck. Then he goes to play for Orange Free State, who are probably a bit better. Finishes up with 150 first-class wickets at 23, having played 45 matches, which is quite a lot if you only play in South Africa, which he only does. He never tours, never travels, never plays for any first-class cricket outside the country. And so if anybody has more information about what he went on to do with his life, I'd be interested to know. If he stayed on the Cape forever, that's where he finished up his life all those years later, and a bowling average of 20.12, which is going to be my guess for Dave Brown.
And going through it here, pretty good first-class numbers as well. 150 wickets at 23.8, but only played 45 first-class games. That might partly be a function of the war, although looking through here, his last
it's just South Africa,
fixture,
I think.
Yeah, 1936-37. No, he finished before the war, so it wasn't even.
Yeah.
Speaking of, I know that Dave Brown's from South Australia, and there was a Corporal Promnitz who was killed in World War II at El Alamein from South Australia. I saw when looking through before, not the same first name, but I just thought that given it was a South Australian connection, he died in 1942. No cricket link here, but just an unusual surname. I thought I'd look it up, and Corporal Walter Herbert Promnitz, who was killed in 1942 at
There
El
are a
Alamein.
few. I did look through some old papers, and there were quite a few Promnitz cricketers in Australia who played sort of local,
Right.
or rep grade or something. Nobody who made it big time. There's no state cricketer, but surprising number of Promnitzes knocking around, mostly batting. But this guy could bowl off breaks and leg breaks.
Cool. Cool. Okay. Well, Jeff, thank you, Dave Brown. I look forward to seeing you, Dave, at the Adelaide Live show. I see no reason why we wouldn't see you there. That's
No,
that's 2 days before the Adelaide Test match, Test match, which will be a day nighter this time between Australia and India. Where are we? I'm next up. Dan Price, 538, which is a number that we've had before, and it's a pleasure we've had before, and it's a friend of mine from our Final Word cricket team as well, and
yep.
ODB and various other places. Dan ran the half marathon with us in Edinburgh earlier this year. He's a fine young cricketer. I saw he made 12 from 5 in his club game on Saturday, which included 3 fours, and very on brand for him. It would have been 4. There would be maybe 4, 4, 4 out. He's a better player than making 12. But my point is that he likes to score in boundaries. Dan likes to go from ball one. He'll get a ton next week in Scotland, by the way, as well. He's joining us in Edinburgh, so I'm going to back him in to make big runs when we're on tour.
Okay.
538. Dan loves his politics. I did think this could be an American politics thing, possibly election year. 538. The number of votes in the US Presidential Electoral College, but no, that's not quite right. Mike,
shouldn't be. Should be more. Where's DC's votes? Where's Puerto Rico's votes?
Should have DC statehood. I still can't believe that doesn't happen. It seems so weird that they wouldn't. I mean, it's a bit like how ACT and Northern Territory don't count for referenda. You know, it's 6 states count, so their votes count in the overall national tally, but they don't get acknowledged in the double majority you require or otherwise in a referendum. Anyway, I digress. Athers Cap is 538. You know, he's a student of the game. Dan, he's a Badger, but so is his dad, by the way. His dad, Jeff Price, is the man who's got the Nerd Pledge T-shirt, which I've told you about, which has his pledge on the breast of it there, and has a lovely logo and a logo of the show on the back, because Jeff is that kind of lovely, caring guy. But
it would be a nice touch if we could arrange it as the Australians have their cap numbers embroidered on the shirts and so on. If Final Word 11 players could have their first Nerd Pledge.
Good idea.
Stitched onto the uniform.
It's exactly the sort of thing that Jeff could pull off. I reckon he's that kind of dude. He's actually the guy who very kindly enabled me to captain a team at Lords a couple of years ago in a sponsors day that Dan and I both played in and had an enormous amount of fun playing there on the main ground at Lords. So it's great that we've got Dan in the mixer with us today. Just on Jeff, I want to link these answers together. So Jeff's first Nerd Pledge was about if I remember this correctly, his first trip to Lords to watch a test match, which was in 1983, where he watched David Gower bat against New Zealand. And that made a real impression, and thus why we told the story of David Gower and that test match in 83, a long time ago when Jeff got involved with the show. Well, 538, I was kind of thinking about this in terms of what might link into an early test playing day. And I was right. 5 for 38. You know, we said today that our numbers sound like averages. Well, 538 sounds like 5-4-38, doesn't it? I'd be pretty confident most of the time 538 comes in, it's going to be bowling figures. And I looked through the list of 5 for 38s, and there is one from 2009, which is absolutely perfect, because that would have been when Dan was a young lad, first time he went to Lords, and he confirmed that it was when Graham Onions took 5 for 38 against the West Indies at Lords in 2009. That was the first time that Dan went to Lords. So he and his dad have some symmetry in the way that their pledges have come in on the show, which I think is just lovely. And Jeff's such a great dad. I think I might have mentioned this on the pod before, that he makes a photo collage book every birthday for Dan, and like gives him a book of all the photos of the year. I mean, it's just the sort of stuff that, you know, he's like, it's like the dad in Bluey. It's like Bandit in Bluey is such a great dad that you can never quite meet that standard. Well, you know, I strive to be as good a dad as Jeff Price is one day, possibly. We'll see.
I found the cheat code around that.
Around
dad inferiority complex. Just don't do it.
Don't have kids yet, quite. Right, so where are we? We're at Lords in 2009. Now, we think of 09 as being an Ashes year, and of course it was. But the series I don't want to call it the warm-up series. That's not doing it justice. But the series they played before turned out to be a bit like that. It's where Ravi Bopara made a number of high scores, a couple of centuries, maybe even 3 centuries.
Three in 3 innings.
There you go. And so that proved for Napier as well, but not for Napier, not for Graham Napier, for Graham Onions as well. But let's just go back a little bit and learn about Graham Onion's backstory. So um, he's a Gateshead boy, so Tyne and Weir up in that northeast corner where most of those cricketers end up playing for Durham. He was talent spotted by the great Jeff Cook, who played 7 Test matches in the early 80s and went on to become Durham's first captain when they joined the championship in 1992. Now, England was calling for Onions as early as 2006. He had a really good season in the championship, taking 54 wickets. They actually brought him into the Champions Trophy squad, but didn't play, and that's that. And it's a he ends up becoming a great county bowler in that little era there. Although, unfortunately, in 2008, when they win the championship, most of that season he's on the sidelines injured. But he's got a reputation, like a lot of them do, out of Durham, which is helped by Steve Harmison, who's a bit of a trailblazer in this respect. Harmison's in the team. They're blasting out teams at Chester Street. Onions is a huge part of that story. And then in 2009, he has a massive year. He takes 79 wickets at 19 in first-class cricket all up. And a lot of that is playing for England. He gets his opportunity to play that debut test match at Lords against the Windies, and he absolutely takes it. The 5 for 38 includes 4 wickets in 7 balls at one stage. So a lovely thing for him to have on test debut, having to wait so long. Is his name, on the honours board and that kind of thing, and really making his presence felt in a big 10-wicket win for England. Interesting here that he bowled after Jimmy, and Jimmy wasn't opening either. I'm not quite sure why this was the case, but Graham Swan opened the bowling in that innings with Stuart Broad. It must have been one of those ones where it was very late in the day and they wanted to turn to spin, but Anderson was bowling second change and Onions was bowling third change. But anyway, by the by, his first wicket was Lendl Simmons. You read back through the Cricinfo commentary and it sounds like a brute of a delivery. And that's something he did so well, hit the seam and made it bloody difficult. That's what I think of when I think of Graham Onions. It's relentless line and length, and it's balls hitting the seam and doing multiple different things. Very much in the image of what we might imagine Anderson when he develops the wobble seam and all the rest of it. Those last couple of wickets were clean bowled, and the stumps were always in play for Onions, so that all stands to reason. He takes a 3 for at Lords in the first innings versus Australia as well. Having missed out at Cardiff. I assume he didn't play at Cardiff because Panesar was playing. And, of course, Panesar in 09 at Cardiff ended up being quite important because he bats with Anderson at the end and gets them through to that famous draw to start the series to salvage that test match. But Onions is there at Lords, 3 for, and that's part of that that big collapse on evening 2 that I witnessed from where I was today, MCC. The story goes that I've told on the podcast many times how I went to the Lord's Test in 2005 by paying a scalper 325 quid and doing all other silly things to make it possible. In 2009, my life had changed quite a bit. I was working for the PM. One of my jobs was as sports advisor. So Cricket Australia gave me tickets to days 1 and 2, which was lovely. And I took a mate who was a journo at the time, Mark Kenny, on day 1. And I took another mate, Tommy Cameron, who was a colleague, on day 2. Both of them were in the UK at the time. Tommy was over working for UK Labor. And at lunch, just before the lunch break on this second day, was when the Queen was coming to receive the teams in front of the pavilion. And I said to Tommy, because we were dressed, I don't know why, we were dressed quite nicely. We had a collar on and a jacket on. We probably didn't need to have that on, but we were, we were smart casual, you might say. Because,
trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, we were on CA tickets. We're in the CA area. We had lovely seats. You want to look the part to a certain extent. And I said to Tommy, fuck it. Why don't we just try and all the Lord Stewards will be up trying to get a glimpse of the Queen. Let's try and blag our way in. And so we did. I walked straight through into the Warner stand like we were meant to be there, pulled up a seat and spent the next session, the middle session of the day, sat in the Warner stand, which you're only meant to be in if you're a member on test playing days. Then at the tea break, or somewhere in the middle session actually, my mate Tommy went to the gents and found 2 tickets to one of the dining rooms, put them in his top pocket, and at tea we went and sat in the dining room. We didn't leave. We were fed wine and sandwiches for the final session when Australia were collapsing and the clouds were encroaching in around Lords and wickets were being taken by a whole slew of England bowlers, but including Graham Onions, and they were bowled out, I reckon, just before the close of play. And that was my day at Lords, so I do remember a little bit of that. Anyway, from Onions, it's quite on brand for me to try and sneak in the
It's
place.
quite the change from '05 to '09.
Yeah,
That's a big shift.
there is. There's from being 20 to 24, quite a bit went on in my life, I guess, in the intervening years. So he plays at Birmingham and takes a really impressive forfeit on the first day there. Well, what was left of the first day after the rain. He gets Watto 62. Remember when they bring Watto back to open? Phil Hughes loses his spot.
Instead of Hughes, yeah.
And of course, it's leg before getting Watto that way. And gets Ponting with a fierce bumper. Then he bowls Hussey first ball. He's on a hat trick in an Ashes test match. Isn't to be, but yeah, again, really making his presence felt. Unfortunately, just with the way it plays out, Harmison was back in the team by the end of the '09 Ashes, and they bring back Flintoff for the Oval Test match, which proved a great shout because Flintoff plays an important role in that win. So he gets squeezed at the end of the summer, but it's a breakout season for him. He's taken wickets at Lords a couple of times, played a role in other Test matches, and he's part of that group of England bowlers, and that gets him on the tour to South Africa, the winter of 2009, 2010. And he takes wickets through the series, the first three matches of it, but he becomes the unlikely hero there at Centurion and Cape Town. And I'm familiar with this. I'm familiar with what he did at Centurion. I didn't realise it happened twice in 3 Test matches. He walks in, 9 wickets down, and at Centurion faced 12 balls to save the Test match. And Cape Town, 2 Test matches later, faces 11 balls to save the Test match. I mean, that's the kind of thing that might happen a couple of times in a long career. Anderson at Sydney and Anderson at Cardiff, for instance, right? I don't think there'll be another time when Anderson did it, right? And Onions did it 2 times in, 3 weeks to hold on for draws at number 11. And that's the same year that Monty and Jimmy have done it. So it's all, that's a bit of an art form of itself, trying to get through to the close and get your team to safety. And he did it twice. And then somehow, outrageously looking at it, he was dropped for the final Test match. And anyway, what do you know? And then sadly, just when he's kind of consolidating himself in the England team, had an important winter tour, an impressive person to have around a dressing room, always hitting the stumps, back injury, shocking back injury. So he's part of the Wisden 5 in 2010. This really bad timing. Oh, by the way, 2010, which is 50 years after when Ken Barrington was in the Wisden 5 in 1960, which I thought was a nice callback to my answer earlier. He has a 5-inch titanium pin put in his back, which is a pretty fucking big pin when you think about,
Christ.
That's what, 12 and a half, 13 centimeters or something like that in new money. That's been slotted into his back to get him back on the park, and he really had to do it tough. And he didn't really get back to his best until 2012. And then, what do you know? Healthy, fit, firing, takes 72 wickets at 14.7 for Durham in 2012, and that's enough to get him back in the Test team. He takes 4 for 88 against the Windies at Edgbaston, albeit in a rainy draw. But it was, I think, at the time I was living in the UK and following it, it felt only right that he would get another opportunity to play Test cricket. Sadly, they don't play him against South Africa. My memory is that there was a big emphasis on getting Steve Finn in the team for that South Africa series that he was bowling so quickly at that point. Sadly, that's the series where Finney hits the stumps with his foot, and that's a bit of a different story that we've told on the pod and in our live shows before. But right then and there, Finn getting back in time for the Safa series meant that Onions dropped out, and sadly, I guess the timing for him was then really bad because Jimmy Anderson was coming into his own as the attack leader. They already had a bowler that was like that, and Onions doesn't, sadly, as I say, play Test cricket again. But he went on this really consistent run for Durham, 73 at 19 in 2013, 69 in 2015, nice, and 55, 32, 59, 45 to finish his long career. By the end of it, he was at Lancashire, where he retired after 2020, his 17-year professional career, 9 Test matches for 32 wickets at 29.9. I always like that when a bowler just stays under the 30 threshold, which he did. 723 first-class wickets at 25.7. Lovely fella as well. I've done a bit of commentary with him when he was coaching up at Lancs. He's at Durham now, working with Ryan Campbell as the bowling coach, and still making a big contribution, and was a fine cricketer. And it all started for him as an England player in 2009 at Lords, where he took 5 for 38, which is, I'm certain, a number for Dan Price.
Very good. Yeah, I'd totally forgotten there was a second blocking it out. I remember there was one. I always think of it, and the Panasar one as being sort of twinned performances, I suppose. They're around the same era, but the fact that it happened twice is curious, and we might come to a related area of things shortly after the break.
It's Storytime 198. You've got Adam Collins and Jeff Lemon with you. I mentioned the tabs before with Ken Barrington, Jeff. How's this? Did you catch much of the second week of the Olympics? We'll probably do a bit of Olympics chat on the weekly show by now, but did you engage much with the track? I know you and Brett spoke extensively about week one.
I was under the pump with trying to get everything together with this trip that I'm doing now and a lot of other work and things. But yeah, there were still bits and pieces I was tuning into.
Well, the Dutch marathon champion, Sifar Hassan, and that was one of the great marathons. I mean, the four of them running in diamond formation with 500 metres to go. Fucking amazing to watch. 2 gold medals at Tokyo in the 5,000 and 10,000 on the track. To come to France, bronze in the 5 and 10 on the track, decided to run the marathon and won gold. I mean, what a versatile, brilliant athlete. One of the true great stories on the track for the Dutch, who had a really good time of it. And I think they ended up with 16 gold medals or something like that. But she was just phenomenal, especially in Olympic record time in the marathon, one of the great runs. And to do it, having decided to add that to her existing pretty full dance card. Well, speaking of which, I can confirm to you that I wouldn't say twisted the arm too much of, our very own Hayley Fuller has now agreed to do the haggis at Edinburgh next year, which is very similar to Sifar Hassan. She'll be running at Edinburgh the 5K, the 10K, the half marathon, and the marathon all in one weekend. The 5 and the 10 on the Saturday, the half and the full back-to-back on the Sunday. She told me today she's 42 weeks away. That's what we are until Edinburgh next year. But I just wanted to acknowledge that Hayley, who's become a great tab in her own right, always involved in the activities that we've been doing with them, invited to the lunches, doing her thing at the dinners. Like, she is so committed to the fundraising effort that she thinks the best thing she can do is push her body to the limit and do what they call the haggis at Edinburgh, all for the tabs, in the very same spirit of our Olympian Sifar Hassan. So I just thought that was a piece of really good news to report as we continue to build up to our next round of fundraising for the Lord's Taverners, Jeff.
Unbelievable. Insane, but unbelievable. I should also note that Sifar Hassan didn't have to back up and do another 21Ks on the same day as running the 42.
Yeah.
That seems to put that in a different league, even if you're not doing quite as fast a time. I'm going to assume that Hayley's not on world record pace, but she's probably getting around in a pretty decent tick of the clock.
Yeah. She's not slow. She's a great runner, Hayley. And she did the London Marathon for the tabs a couple of years ago and Edinburgh as well, and the half with us this year. So thank you to Hayley for being a terrific part of what we do. We've already got our London quota full. We had a great response to that a couple of weeks ago. So we'll talk more about that as we get deeper into the year. Edinburgh will be massive again. 75 runners for 75 years. That's going to be the story we're telling. Next year, I'm taking the field for the Taverners on Friday, so before this pod's gone live, but ahead of time where we are right now, at Arundel against the Duke of Norfolk's 11. So hopefully I can bowl well at a bunch of blokes I've played a bit of cricket with now for MCC. That would be great, and I'll have my family there for that. So a great day with the Tavs coming up, and stay in touch with us and stay in touch with them because they are good people doing good things, and we're so proud to be in association with them.
All right, I've got a number. It's going to be a little complicated, this one. It's from Jeremy Nash. It's $dollars or pounds? Can't remember. It's $3.80, whatever it is. And initially it started out, it came in with a clue quite a while ago. And the clue said that this related to something James Anderson said at the end of the 21-22 Ashes about a test batting record he thought he held but wished he didn't.
Okay.
Jeremy said, I calculated the number by hand, so it might be wrong, but since then it has gone up by 2. I would previously have pledged 360. So I take that to mean it was 36, then it went up to 38, whatever it was. Now, before this clue came around, we talked about the subject matter of this answer on the show randomly on a tangent because I'd been spreadsheeting some niche shit and it happened to come up. So Jeremy wrote back in and said, well, okay, you've now answered this question. So he went hunting around for another reason for 380 and came back with a changed 380 that said, I've noticed a rare Australian one-cap wonder. If you've not done him in this match before, please use my pledge as an excuse to do so. Now, Jezza could feel like he's been hexed here because we then independently did a story not that long ago about the adopted West Australian Matthew Nicholson, who was indeed test cap 380 and who was quick when he was on and not so good when he wasn't, and played his one test Boxing Day 1998. And we talked about his, was it 50 episodes ago? Was it that long ago? I can't remember exactly. It might be Storytime 138. But we talked about him in some detail. I remember having a long Matthew Nicholson chat.
Oh, we absolutely did. We spoke about his ill-fated trip to Zimbabwe. Indeed, we only spoke about the Melbourne Test in '98 a fortnight ago when referencing Warren Heggs. So it's not unusual for these storylines to cross over each other. But yeah, we've done the Nicholson story. Make no mistake.
Right. So 380. Right. And at this point, Jezza might be going FFS, every time I put a number in, it comes up before it gets on the show. But the interesting thing here, Jeremy, is that your original number needs another update because it was Anderson. And I was when I was working out this batting record, initially I was looking at scores of naught not out, which it isn't because Anderson ended up on 42 of those at the time and 44 by the end of his career,
right.
Batting innings of 0 not out. And then eventually, for whatever reason, I came to the idea of, is it about being the last player out to lose a test match? Which it couldn't be because that happened about half the number of times that we needed it to do. But if you double that number, then it could be the times that he wasn't out, but he was there. And that's the thing that came good. So number of times he's been batting when England have lost a test.
Ah, right. So like the reverse of what we described before with the Graham Onions, Anderson.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
As Anderson's got a couple of famous ones where he gets out. The Sri Lanka one with 2 balls to go. The New Zealand one was the last ball of the match, wasn't it?
Well, it wasn't the last ball of the match. It was
second last.
No, it wasn't the last over. It was more that they had 1 run to win. So
there's 1 run to win.
Yeah, so
and the wide wasn't paid.
That's right. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, that's when I went through those. This is the thing that I discovered some time ago, sort of incidentally, is I looked up the number of times that this had happened, and indeed, it tallies. It had happened 36 times when Jez's pledge first came through, 38 by the time we answered it unwittingly, and the couple that took it to 38 were Wellington 2023 and then Lords 2023 when Josh Tongue makes 19. They put on 25 for the last wicket and sort of just give England some prayer for a minute that they might actually get there, and even though they end up about 50 short when Josh Tongue gets out. Anderson's 3 not out. He's not out in his last test innings, of course, when Jamie Smith muffs the farming the strike bit, but that's England's first innings and they win the test, so that doesn't count for this particular tally. But in between those times, Jimmy Anderson goes to India, and twice in India he had to bat in the 4th innings of the test match. When your number 11's batting in the 4th innings, that is a bad sign. So Vizag, they're chasing 399. He was 5 not out when Tom Hartley gets out, about 100 runs short. Rajkot chasing 557. They were about 450 short when Mark Wood was bashing them around and then got out, and Anderson is 1 not out. So those were losses in the 4th innings. And there's a loss in the 3rd innings, but by an innings. So it's the last partnership of the match in Dharamshala, where Root gets out for 84, trying to slog Bumrah down the ground. Anderson, not out. So if you run through the entire Anderson career, 6 times he's out in the 3rd innings when they're losing by an innings. He makes 12 runs while doing that. 6 times he's not out in the 3rd innings while someone else gets out in the 3rd innings to lose by an innings. And he makes 8 runs in those innings. Never makes a duck while England lose a test match in the 3rd innings to lose by an innings. There you go. Right. There's a niche stat for you. Yeah. Does make a lot of ducks while he's getting out in the 4th innings to lose a test match, though. He makes 6 of them, I think. So he gets out in the 4th innings 14 times and totals 26 runs. And then he has 15 other times when he's batting in the 4th innings and he's not out and someone else gets out and he makes 47 runs in the process. So all 3 of his innings in that India series were unbeaten. So if you tally it all up by the end, 41 times that he's there at the end when England lose, 20 of them he's the player out, 21 he's the player not out. That's the final end of career summary, which means that he nudged ahead on not outs. He managed to make sure there was no deficit there. He was more reliable than he wasn't when it came to that situation, and he can always point down the other end and say, well, if they'd stuck around, it might have been different.
Well, I wonder how his T20 domestic batting stats might change since our interview with him last week. And again, I'm sure that'll be the catalyst for a few conversations on the show we would have already released, I guess. But a conversation between us and around the cricket world too. I wonder whether there were phone calls made today around the Big Bash clubs. That Anderson fella. What do we reckon? Do we think? Is it worth a crack? I hope so.
Yeah, I think it'd be worth. I think there'd be some Australian players who would enjoy the chance to line up and have a crack at him and see if they could George Bailey him. They'd relish the opportunity to try to belt him off a length if that could come around.
We might do that in the weekly show in some more depth. Jeff, it looks like you want to do a revisit here before we finish up.
I do. This is one coming in from Matt Gaynor. Largely, this is because Matt Gaynor has a new number which is due, and I still haven't solved the revisit from many, many, many months earlier. So I've got to get this one out of the way before I can address his new one.
I owe Matt a reply to a very thoughtful email he sent about the Olympics to me today, and a few others in the email chain. We have a thing going with Big Al and a couple of others. Right. Hello, Matt. Hopefully, I've replied to you by the time you're listening to this.
Mm-hmm. So this is maybe the longest clue that we've ever received, and maybe one of the more deranged, but for that reason I thought I should read it out because some effort has gone into it. When Matt wrote in a long time ago, it was about a pledge of £7 flat. This was the one going back to Storytime 138. He said, privileged to be on an episode with a Coney cameo, a Comeo perhaps. But Jeff was so close to the answer first time around with Andy and Guy Whittle, and now he's so far away. So, this must be third crack at this. Okay. It feels like it played out like this, says Matt. Cue dream sequence. It's the 9th of June 1999, and young Jeff Lemon can't believe his luck. He's at the home of cricket, Lords, watching Australia play in the World Cup. There's a competition to meet the teams afterwards, but alas, the winning seat is 2 rows behind. Jeff hears a young Melbourne accent. I'm so excited to meet Mark Waugh, who has just scored a century. I'm sorry, Adam, we need to go now to beat the traffic, comes the reply. The steward reappears to ask, does anyone else want to meet the players? Young Jeff puts up his hand and is whisked away to the pavilion. It's deemed inappropriate for him to see Warnie's party trick, so he is ushered to the other dressing room. The other team are friendly. That's a big beer for a small boy, says Pommy Mbangwa. 5 minutes later, Jeff is chatting to the Whittles, who say, let us introduce you to our friend. I think he's going to win a big game on this ground in years to come. But young Jeff is gone. He's looked at the honours board and seen 1930 C. Grimmett, 6 for 167, and has dashed off to the Lord's library to find out more, starting a path that will many years later lead to him mistakenly talking about Major William Booth and Matthew Nicholson as the answer to a £7 nerd pledge. I swear to God I didn't stitch this up. I put this in because I was like, I have to do this one this week, and then found that in the middle of it. So it all just came together.
Perfect. I remember the Coney cameo as well. I remember you recorded that at the back of the commentary box during the Birmingham test last year.
That's right. About... I can't remember what it was about.
It was about a one-day game where New Zealand chased 350-odd in Australia against England.
That's right.
In the Tri-Series game where Hadley
made
a stack of runs and Coney was there at the end. I remember that much.
Yeah. So Matt goes on. It's now June 2023, and Jeff is back at Lord's thinking, who is that mystery man I nearly met? Why does the number 7 ring a bell? And why does it work both internationally and domestically with the decimal point in a different place? So... previously, I didn't answer about players who had taken 7 test wickets, which is how we came to Matthew Nicholson, who did that, who also turned up today as cap 380. And to start off with, looking at who played for Zimbabwe at the World Cup in 99 at Lords against Australia, both the Whittles, both the Flowers, Heath Streak, Dirk Villiern, Paul Strang, Murray Goodwin, Henry Alonga. Pommy Mbangwa was not there, contrary to the clue. But I thought... Flowers, the Flowers could be the way to go because Matt has often had an Essex connection and they both played for Essex.
Yeah.
But the sevens thing doesn't link as strongly. The 7 thing links more strongly for Murray Goodwin, who made 47 in that World Cup game. And we've told his story before at some length of going from Zimbabwe as a kid to Perth, growing up playing cricket in WA, back to Zimbabwe playing for them, back to Perth and playing for Western Australia, ending up in England playing for Sussex for all those years, making triple centuries, and so on and so on. I can't remember the episode number, but we have talked about the Murray Goodwin stuff. International to domestic by moving a decimal point. He took 7 wickets in List A cricket, so that includes all his domestic stuff, and batted 70 innings in one-day international cricket. So domestic 50-over cricket, 7 wickets.
Oh, yeah.
International 50-over cricket, 70 innings with the bat. I think that works. Move a decimal, 7-7. Also took 7 first-class wickets, just coincidentally, although never took a wicket in his 19 test matches, where he made 3 tons and averaged 42 for a team that was up against it almost all of the time, which is, those are very, very good numbers for him to return from 19 tests. The final that they played at Lords, this is where I'm a little worried about the answer because it's not a match-winning performance from Murray, but he was there. Sussex in the one-day trophy of 2006 got bowled out for 172 and still beat Lancashire by 15 runs. Equal top score of 37 was Michael Yardy and Yasser Arafat. Talk about a dream dinner party situation there. Interesting conversation around the table. Goodwin scored 7. There's another Goodwin 7. So, look, it might be a Flower thing. It might be an Andy Flower thing or a Grant Flower thing. But if it is, forgive me. More recently, though, I didn't clock this at the time, but I did while researching it today. In the news at the end of the 2023 Australian season, Murray Goodwin was playing in the grand final of the Bunbury and Districts Cricket Association, nicked off for 2, and got charged by the umpires for assaulting another player because they said he swung his bat at the head of the wicketkeeper who was running by to celebrate. Umpire suspended him from the rest of the game. The league then banned him for 3 years with a partially suspended sentence after 16 matches, which is still massive. Like, how many matches would you play in a normal, districts season?
10. Well, no, you probably play 12 or 13 because a lot of them are 2 days.
Yeah. So basically, he'd be well into the second season by the time he'd be able to come back. Some reasonable chance that it was not as bad as it sounds. So Murray Goodwin teed off afterwards saying that this was absolute bullshit, that he'd been charged with this. His account was that he was walking off with his head down and he looked up, and just as he looked up, the wicketkeeper was sprinting straight at him, screaming, and then jumped to the side at the last second. And he said he just reflexively pushed the bat at him to try to not get run into because he wasn't expecting somebody to be doing that. And so that there's some dodgy frog box footage that sort of makes it look like he's trying to clobber the guy in the head, but it might have been more responding to a perception of aggression going the other way. Murray Goodwin said, "I've played 40 years and over 1,500 games of cricket and have never had any blemish whatsoever," in order to suggest that he's probably unlikely to be trying to take a guy's head off in a Bunbury district final.
Also, though, has the reputation as being one of the loosest cricketers ever. So, that might not have helped his cause. Yeah, I'm not saying he did it, but it may not have helped that Murray Goodwin is almost a byword for looseness in domestic cricket over here from his days.
But not so much on the field, though. It was more about party time.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. I really like the touch. My favourite bit actually is that the supposed evidence that they're relying on is this blurry still from a frog box camera, and the wicketkeeper's name is Cam Mara. Camara. I also enjoyed that the bowler's name is Tyson Italiano. What a great name. I'm pretty sure I've talked about someone called Jimmy Australia on this show before, so that's just the Italian version of that. So I don't know if it got overturned. He was trying to overturn it and was threatening to bring in lawyers and all the rest of it last year. Don't know if that happened for this year, but it's a shame. It's a shame that happened. It's a shame also that Murray Goodwin became a real estate agent, which is like the worst tier of human achievement, getting in the real estate trade. But and it's a shame because we're big fans of Murray Goodwin here, but unfortunately the real estate agents will be first against the wall when the revolution comes. So that is sad. that's how it's going to have to pan out for Muzz. But we loved your work on the field. I'll say that.
Jeff's comment does not reflect my opinion. A few things here.
It never does.
A few things here. I'm interested in this 1999 scorecard, right? So I remember the day, of course, when Wall makes the 100 at Lords and Neil Johnson makes the 132 not in reply. You're right. A few things to note about Matt. He makes the greatest playlists ever. He's got an unbelievable ear. Goes to lots of gigs. It's like, what's that thing that Gideon used to put on his blog, Cuts and Glances, years ago? I've read it, so you don't need to. The same applies with Matt. I've listened to it, so you don't need to. I'll filter all the music and I'll give you an end-of-year playlist, and on and on it goes. And the other thing is, he's a big Essex fan. And Andy Flower did go on to play for Essex. I'd be surprised if there's not some connection to Andy Flower here and what he's done for Essex. That's all I'm going to say.
It probably is, but I've had 3 goes at it, Matt. I'm out. I'm piecing out of this one.
I'm sure Matt will be happy to supply the answer, but if I've looked through that Zimbabwe team from that day, Johnson, Flower, Goodwin, Flower, Campbell, Alistair Campbell, I mean, with the name sharing with the other Alistair Campbell, but no, this is beyond the point where his big victory was in 97. Whittle, Dirk Violan, Heath Streak, Paul Strang, Andy Whittle, Henry Alonga. Like, the only one that's really jumping out at me that could work is Flower. Did Essex win a trophy somewhere when Flower was playing there? But you know what? It's okay. You know what? Also, Jeff, we've reached the point where I have to go as well. So it's probably not a bad point.
Andy Flower did take 7 first-class wickets, so there is a 7 there, but there's not. I don't see anything that relates to a move the decimal point. I don't see a 0.7 or a 70. Or
why don't I check 7. One more thing then? Why don't we just go? Well, we'll do this on the fly. When did Essex win stuff? Of the white ball variety. They won the T20 Cup in 2019. No. They won the Gillette NatWest Cup in 2008. That's interesting. The Sunday Pro 40 League in 2005 and 2006. I think 2008 he's finished. He must be. He was coaching England by 2009. Is it possible the Sunday Pro 40 League, whatever you want to call it, was won by Andy Flower in either 2005 or 2006? There is an outside chance. You know what? That's for Matt to solve or to tell. That's us done. Jeff, you've got a flight to catch. I've got a radio cross to do. This has been Storytime 198. We want to thank a few people along the way, or organisations and people collectively. Westfield, London, Westfield, Stratford City, more extra, less ordinary. Lord's Tabs, love them. Sign up to run with us. It's going to be brilliant. Can't wait to play for them next week when we're in Scotland against the 40 Club. That's going to be quite the day out in Edinburgh. All of our patrons who fundamentally make this program work. If we didn't have the patrons, we couldn't be the independent, whatever we are, it wouldn't be as it is if not for our patrons. We couldn't do the kind of interviews we've done in the last few weeks that require all the extra work and all the other bits and pieces. Patron is what fuels. It is the heartbeat of the Final Word. And the fact that we've got the Discord channel there, the ad-free feed, the discounted tickets to the live shows in Australia, all of that is folded in. So please become a patron today and support what we're doing and become part of our community. And to everyone more widely for continuing to listen to these shows. We're 2 away from 200. Who would have thought, Jeff, when we started the formal story times in the pandemic, that we'd be this close to reaching another one of those important milestones? And it'll be difficult for us to do something on show 200 because I'm not entirely sure how we'll pull it off, but we'll put our thinking caps on and we'll work something out because you'll be in America. You'll be in America. I'll be on book deadline. Like we're both busy boys right now, but we'll try and do something, or maybe we do it on like show 202 or something, and we make it out. Like there might
maybe we live our values about milestones being bullshit and arbitrary, and we should just do everything in a base 11 system instead of a base 10 system. Episode 222. In fact, that would be more appropriate because Nerd Pledge starts with 222 for Richie via Philip Meng. So episode 222.
And I'm seeing Mengy. Mengy's coming up to Edinburgh to play for us next week. He's going to be one of the first crossover artists. He'll have the baggy gold and he's got the baggy gold from you, doesn't he, from last year?
Yes.
And he'll get the baggy blue
from Sydney. Yeah, he came from Perth to play the Sydney game.
In fact, I just got 10 more in the mail the other day. Here are the new baggy blues. Jeff, you're going to get one of them on the 20th of October, and a few of our players next week in Edinburgh. Right. Must go. Must answer a phone call from radio station to talk about Jimmy Anderson.
Okay.
Has been story time. We love yous all. Have nice weekends.
See ya.